Promises are JavaScript constructs which allows us to perform asynchronous calls without blocking the UX or the UI or the client that is consuming this asynchronous function. They are designed especially for operations that include a lot of waiting, like making a REST call or making a network call or like a timer, having a timer running in the background. So this is like what promises are designed for. In this video, we will learn about promises and how we can use them, all right? And we're going to learn about how we historically have done this before promises came into the picture, and we're going to learn what is after promises. This is coming up. What's up, y'all? This is Hussein Nasser from iGeometry, where we discuss software engineering by example. And if you're new here, welcome. We discuss all kind of software engineering in this channel. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. And with that said, let's just jump into the video, guys. So in order to discuss promises, we really need to know what came before it, right? We can just like, hey, this is a new thing, go and learn it. I don't like to do that, right? I like to come back and see why we are inventing a new technology. There is always a reason for everything in life, okay? And this is one of it, right? And I just learned this new sweet thing here, just like in Google Drive. This is what is it called? The slideshow, whatever. I don't. This is the PowerPoint version of Google. I don't know what it's called, right? But this is so sweet. All right, so this is the callback. I'm gonna overuse this, guy, so bear with me. I love this stuff. So callback function is what came before promises, right? So when we deal with asynchronous stuff, right? When we make an asynchronous call, we wanted to know that, hey, let me know if your function succeeds, right? So what we used to do is like we give it a callback function. It says, hey, this is on success, call this. On error, call this. And it used to work beautifully, but coding was miserable, guys. If you know what I'm saying, right? If you wrote asynchronous code, that is ugly, because you end up into nested functions, and you cannot read this thing. So JavaScript, the community behind JavaScript came up with the promises, which made it a little bit better. But there's something better than promises, right? That it even made it better and better, okay? But we'll come to that. So that was callback function. So that's the first thing we're going to discuss. Callback functions, right? So promises, that's and we're going to write a callback function from scratch, right? Show you how it's done, right? Promises, we're going to replace it with a promise using .then.catch, right? I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about .finally, which is a new stuff in promises, right? And finally, we're going to talk about async await. Once you have a promise-based function, a function that returns a promise, you can start using async await, which is pretty cool. I think this is where everyone is going, right? I mean, it's really, you're going to find out after the end of the video. I'm going to ask you a question, and I think it's a preference. Some people like to use promises like .then.catch. Some people like to use async await. It's up to you as a developer to choose, right? With that said, let's just jump into the code, guys. Okay, guys, so in order to start working with this video, you need a text editor. My favorite is Visual Studio Code. Download that. It's free. It's the best, right? And you're gonna also need a web server, okay? Like I'm gonna use Node.js with HTTP-server. I'm gonna reference the videos that. Let's just jump into the video and create a new project, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new project. File, open, and a project is really just nothing but a folder, guys, all right? So I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm gonna call it promise demo, right? And then I am going to open that folder, and voila, I have a brand new folder. And I'm gonna create an HTML file, because that's all our JavaScript code lives in the HTML. Obviously, you can do the same thing exactly with Node.js, right? But it's easier to run in the browser, guys. Right? I'm gonna create an index.html, right? Let's spin up a just boilerplate HTML5, and we're ready to start coding, guys. All right, so here's what I want to do, guys. I'm gonna add a script tag here and I'm gonna write a function with a callback function, right? That's how we used to do that. And this function is called do that, right? It does something, and what it does is imagine when you call it, sometimes it fails, sometimes it succeeds. Like obviously this is this is like made up, right? This is just like a it's not really a true scenario, but I want to simulate some sort of a network call that sometimes fails, sometimes succeeds. So what I'm gonna do is literally generate a random number, right? I don't know, n, and then multiply by 1,000 because it's fraction, and then literally just do a %, right? Okay, so just a random number. Cool, this is better, right? So just random number, and if this number is odd, if it's even, this is a success, and if it's odd, it's a failure. I know, obviously, it's completely made up, right? Contrived, that's the word I'm looking for. Oh my god. Okay, so what we used to do thing is, you would write this function and you would pass in a callback function. If it's success, call this function. If it failed, call this function, right? On success, on error. So this is exactly what I'm gonna do. But I'm not gonna just immediately fail. I'm gonna just simulate like a call, right? So I'm gonna do a set timeout and add the callback function here. Is like whenever you're done after like a second, call success, right? And then why not pass in the number that you succeeded on, right? And this is like 1,000, okay? And the same thing exactly when this is failed on error, okay? And then you pass this thing, right? And that's it, right? That's how we write. This is how we classically do things, right? We used to do that in the like mid 2000s and even early 2000s, right? And so because JavaScript you can pass in a function just like another variable, you would able to do that. So let's use that and let's see how we actually use that, guys. Remember, so here I'm gonna call do that, okay, and it needs a function when it succeeds. What do you want me to do, right? So this function, because look at that, it actually takes a number. So I am gonna take a number here. It's called n. This is an arrow function, guys. So this is like a simple arrow function. I'm gonna literally pass it a function that says, I say success. I don't know how to spell, right? And then n, right? And the second argument is a failed function, right? So I say console dot. You can do dot log, but I'm gonna do dot error because it's just like the browser labels it differently, right? Error. Then you can do that. Okay. So this is one way of doing things, guys, but we can just use these nice sticks to replace this. This is exactly equal to this, right? So just showing you different things you can do here, right? And we need to be fancy, right? We need to be fancy sometimes. Okay, so do that, and that's what we're gonna do, right? So let's go ahead and spin up my server here. I'm gonna create a new terminal, and then literally I'm gonna type http://server, and then click dot. And I have made a video about that. It's like how do you spin up like a Node.js static file server. You can, if you're using Windows, literally copy this index.html and do initpop www-root if you have IIS, and that just will immediately work for you. Okay, so my server is running on localhost 8080. Let's just spin that up, guys. Spin it up. Localhost 8080, right? Let's go ahead and open the developer. Okay, and you can see that we got a success. We got an error. What? Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. We don't know how to spell, guys. Praise the Lord. Parse-int. Not praise. Oh my God, praise the Lord. Under his... What the heck? Parse-int. You think me parse-int is not... What? Parse integer. Oh, I'm sorry. It's parse with... Okay, whatever. Okay. So it's still a lowercase. All right. Sorry, guys, about that. Right. So refresh. Right. And there you go. Error. That's what we want to see. We got an odd number. So error. So if I refresh again, we got success. So this is what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes we're going to succeed. Sometimes it's going to fail based on the number. So that's an example of a callback function. Okay. This is how we used to do things back in the days, right? So what's wrong with this, guys? Looks clean, right? But here's where it gets really problematic. Let's say if you call do that, right, and it succeeds, you want to do something else, right? So you're not usually just printing things like this, right? Usually what you do is like, hey, when you call this function and it succeeds, I want you to really call it again, right, and do something else, right? And just especially when you're calling REST endpoints and you're waiting for a result, you get that result and you want to do something with the result, so you'll end up in this infinite kind of ugly code, right? And you just, it's already just with 2 layers is already hard to read, right? So that's the ugliness that we want to get away from. Okay, that's where it gets really ugly. So promises, how can I use promises, guys? So I'm gonna write my do that 2.0 function, but I'm gonna promisify it. Do that 2 is gonna be a promise-based function. That's much easier to say. Okay, so do that 2 will. This is how we do it. How you promise specifier. You immediately return a new promise. Okay. Immediately you get back a result. If you call this thing, you get back a promise. And a promise is this chainable class, chainable object that tells you, hey, dot then, that catch, right? So that's essentially what a promise is, right? So what you do is like you return this, but a promise, right? A promise is expecting you to do something because it's promising you to do something. You gotta give it something in return, man. So what you do is you give it a function. And this function, right? That's what you give it. You give it a function. This function takes 2 parameters: resolve, reject, right? Which are in their self, they are functions, right? Which is equivalent to your own success and on fail, if you think about it. All right. So what happens here is when you call do that 2, it will immediately return you a promise, and it will immediately execute this function for you. And whenever it's ready, it's going to call either reserve and reject based on the condition that you have here. So usually while writing promises, guys, you maybe 80% of you will not deal with writing promises. They will deal with consuming promises. I'm gonna talk about that later, right? So this is how you write a promise. It's unless you're building APIs, you're not gonna really write a promise, but who knows? Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna steal this code here, put it inside this function, and what I'm gonna do is get a number, set timeout. Instead of calling unsuccess, there's nothing called unsuccess. You call resolve and you pass it anything you want. You can pass it a number, you can pass it a JSON, you can pass it, right? Anything, right? So this is exactly now, we just wrote a promise, okay? So what happens here, get the number, if it's even, succeed, first do a timeout after 1,000 milliseconds, resolve it, right? Else reject it, okay? And so on. Okay, how do I use that thing, guys? How do I use this thing? Are we still recording? Okay, so we call do that 2, right? And do that 2 doesn't take anything, right? Do that 2. And here's how we do it. Do that 2 returns a promise, right? So it's an object, so you can do dot then, right? And then expect you to send a function to it is when things are going beautifully, right? You send a function and we'll call it if things are going, everything is good and everything is a result. You call it will call that function for you, right? Else it will call catch for you, right? Here's the thing. You can call then as many times as you want. Catch is always once because there's always one error, but you can unlimitedly call then, right? So what do we want to do in case of a then? I want to, just like we did before, just say success promise. Let's make it short. And then E is just, I just named it a variable. You can call it N, you can call it whatever you want, right? So you can do this way, okay? And then in case of an error, you do console.error, and then you can do error, and then you can do, right, N. Sweet. Let's test this thing. Let's test it, guys. Refresh, refresh. And there you go. Success promise. Let's refresh again. Error because it's odd. Even. And still this code is okay. It's not bad, right? So let's start to complicate things a little bit, guys. Let's say I want to, after things are good, I want to call do that again and do something else, right? So here's what we're going to do. So this function is going to be callback because I'm going to write more than one line of code. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to success first. And then I'm going to follow it up with return do that too. What this will do is like we'll call do that too. Imagine, right? You're gonna succeed. You'll get back here. It will call console log succeed that, and then we'll call do that too, which is in itself it's another promise which will get returned to this thing, right? So you need to catch that second promise. So you can do dot then again, right? And then you can do, let's say, console.log, the second success, baby. That's a second success, and you can get that number too, right? I keep forgetting the text, right? So you can do this way, right? And if you don't do the curly brace and you just do n do that too, that will immediately call that function because essentially what the arrow function does is like if you have one line of code, it immediately returns that. You don't have to specify a return function. Okay, so let's test this thing. So what I'm expecting here is, so we got unlucky here. The first call was was an odd number, 865. Okay, so odd, there you go, success, and then fail. So this is what happened here. What the first call, right? The first call gave us an even number. So we success the first time, and then we called it again, which we got an odd number, which called this, and we failed, right? Essentially, right? I want a case where we get two even numbers in a row, and essentially this terminates. Let's try that. I want to get that case, guys. Let's believe, guys. Oh man, error. Let's keep refreshing. Yes! There you go, guys. Took me like at least 10 tries. Oh my god, I'm so unlucky here. All right, so the previous video I made, it's like I got it from the second try. But again, essentially, this is what you got. You get an even number. We called it again. We got a second even number, so we got success. All right, let's talk about finally, guys. Finally is, and some of you might already familiar with this, with you do try and catch, right? Finally is another part of the promise where you can call also once, right? It takes a function, and what it does is it will call this function for you regardless of whether you have succeeded or you have failed, right? You always call this at least one, and it's very, very, very useful, especially when you're doing like let's say you're opening a database connection, right? It's like we have done this. We have actually used it in Postgres versus JavaScript video. I'm going to reference that in the cards, right? Where we open a cursor here, and then we waited, and if the cursor is succeeded, we're going to do a query, and then after that we're going to do another query, and finally we want to close that cursor, close that connection, right? So you have to use final in this case to clean up, right? Whether that cursor or that connection failed to open, you're going to go to catch, and then you want to also close the connection and clean up, all right? So it's used for cleanup, essentially. So let's just do console.log, and let's say, finally, I'm here, all right? So if I do refresh, failed, we'll go finally. There you go. That's what I wanted. Okay, success one. All right, we call it the second time, and then finally I'm here. All right, guys. So we talked about callbacks. We talked about promises. We talked about finally, and finally, we're gonna talk about async await. And now This is one way to do things, right, guys? Then catch, right? Especially if you have like one line of code, this is beautiful, right? So you can literally remove that, by the way, guys. And then this is equivalent to that, but you're not gonna get the console.log in the first one, right? That's the only difference, right? But what we want to do here is I want to consume this function. Once you have a promise-based function, you can consume it this way, like we just did. And another way is to consume it with an asynchronous function, right? Let's call this function. I'm going to create a function here. And you have to create a function to execute it in an async way, right? And this is how you do it. Okay, let's call this function execute, right? So in this case, we just wrote the code in the body, but here we have to write a function. Let's call it, I know, execute do that, right? Right? And then you have to declare this function as async function. Okay. Once you do that, what you do is, and this is the beauty, it will read as if it's synchronous code. I'm gonna declare an n variable const n equal do that to, but you have to add a wait after it. And here's the cool part, guys. Success. You can just do this way. That's one way of doing it, right? So you can call this succeed, and then immediately we'll get a result right back. So you can, what this will happen is essentially this will await the result and kind of call then for you and get back the result for you, which is this variable n. It will send you this variable and put it in this value, okay? That's what it does, essentially. So you're gonna get our number, essentially, and then what you can do is like literally just write code as you normally do, as a synchronous code, okay? So the problem with this is you have to add a try catch here, okay? So what you do is like you do a try, and then you do a catch, and that catch will capture essentially your error, right? So let's do console.error. Let's say failed, and then let's just do e here, okay? And let's execute the code here. So obviously we have to call the function because it's just a function, right? Let's just literally call this function, and just like take a look at the code, guys, before we run it. So this is how you do it. That's another way of doing it using async await. So async, we'll call this do that to get the number, print it if good. If this failed, that means you're gonna go to catch, literally go to the catch, right? And then obviously you can do a finally here, and then do like console.log finally. Okay, you can do whatever you want. Oh, sorry, this doesn't have that. Okay, sweet. Let's execute that, guys. Refresh. Success A finally. Failed. Same thing. Makes sense, guys? Makes sense. And now you can just do this, right? I guess just normally do another do that to get, like, let's say this is calling a REST endpoint. You get back the result, the JSON result, or the number, and then you can do stuff with this, right? Console.log, like let's say second call main, and then we got n1, right? And you can do this infinite number of times. I'm really torn, guys, to what is the best approach. I like this a lot. I think I started using this approach more than the then, because this is, if you think about it, there's a lot, some ugliness to this. I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm gonna pass the question back to you. Write in the comment section, what do you prefer, async await or then catch the finally, or you're an old school guy or girl that like the callbacks, right? Tell us in the comment section below, right? That said, the final thing. Oh, we actually can debug, guys. We didn't show that part, right? But we don't really know to show, right? But essentially, you can refresh that. Success, fail. And one success followed by another success. Refresh this multiple times. There you go, second time. Let's go for a third. No. Here, let's do a debug, guys. Here's how we do debugging. This is debugging. Definitely async await wins with debugging, right? So this is like another item that we didn't discuss. Debugging, right? So if I do that and I do, look at it. It waits for a second. It actually executes that code and waits for a second, and you get back the number. And you can just hover over this. And if we're lucky, we can actually see the number. Where's the number? 516. That's undefined. Let's do it again. And we failed because we actually failed. And then we get back the number as E here, 8939. And then immediately, obviously, we're going to call this is an error that the browser will treat. All right. All right, guys. That's all for us today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, hit a like, subscribe for more coolish stuff. And if you're having questions about what is the asynchronous versus synchronous, I should have said that in the beginning. Consider checking out my video here. I'm gonna list it in the cards. Asynchronous versus synchronous. What's the difference between the two, right? So watch that video. I made a video like literally using YouTube as a use case, right? How the uploading works with YouTube. Okay, and you can clearly that. I think it's a popular video. Some people like it. And with that said, I'm gonna see you in the next one. You guys stay awesome.